Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the Building Efficiency Accelerator platform this morning for a webinar on getting started with the BEA, stakeholder engagement and action selection. We're happy to welcome both our partners and cities that are already partners and would like to get a deeper dive on the initial steps of engaging with the platform, some of our policy and project selection best practices, and more. And we're also happy to welcome partners in cities that are not yet working with us, but we're excited to get to know you and to work with you. We are happy to have 3 BEA partners presenting this morning on the webinar. We're going to be going over an introduction to what the partnership is, how we work with cities, what kind of support we can offer cities and partners that are interested in getting started on building efficiency local action. We're going to be going over best practices for selecting actions and some examples of how the BEA can support the action selection process. And we'll also be presenting some tools that the BEA can offer on those initial few steps. And at the end of the webinar, we'll welcome question and answers from everyone. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for today. We have Rebecca Cameron from ICLEI Africa, Sumedha Malaviya with WRI India, and Debbie Weyl with the Global Office here at the World Resources Institute. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sumedha, who is our first presenter.
All right. Thanks, Shannon, and thank you to everyone who has joined this webinar. To all the new cities that have joined, a very warm welcome to BEA. My name is Sumedha, and I work with WRI India's energy program to support BEA activities globally and in the region. A bit of a background to the BEA, and I'll just want to walk through quickly on the history of the Building Efficiency Accelerator. And some of you may be already familiar with this. In 2011, the UN launched the Sustainable Energy for All initiative with the goal of achieving sustainable energy for all by 2030 through 3 objectives: ensuring universal access to modern energy services, doubling the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix, and doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. So currently, we are looking at an average rate of improvement of about 1.3%, and the aim is to work towards a 3% annual rate of improvement by 2030. And this goal is achievable. There have been a lot of studies and research done on what kinds of improvements are possible, but these activities must be scaled quickly. The IEA has found that through its modeling exercises that the global building sector can contribute to emissions reductions of up to 42% just between 2012 and 2050. Cutting back to fast track to 2015, at the Paris Climate Summit, 6 accelerators were launched to support specific sector-based energy efficiency programs. The Building Efficiency Accelerator is one of these 6 accelerators. Given the fact that the local governments have a very strong role to play in influencing the efficiency of new and existing buildings in their communities as either owners or investors, as conveners or facilitators, we thought about the BEA to focus on that particular level, particularly at the subnational level. So the BEA was created to drive public commitments at a city, state, or a regional level through a collaboration involving businesses and NGOs that could provide the tools, the expertise, the technical capabilities, and in some cases, the financial capacity to subnational governments to help accelerate the improvements in coordination with the other different government entities. And we don't need to remind ourselves why building efficiency is important, but just to understand the kind of problem we are looking at and the large potential that the building sector holds, buildings consume about 1/3 of the energy demand, and it is possible to reduce this energy demand by 1/3 by 2050. And let's not forget the long-lasting implications of buildings. They are around for a really long amount of time, and we can be locked into very inefficient and highly polluting buildings or we can go a different pathway towards more comfortable buildings having low GHG emissions. There are also these enormous multiple benefits, multiple co-benefits of buildings efficiency that we need to talk about more while engaging and talking with our local governments, whether it's more jobs, better health and productivity for people, or providing energy access through lowered expenditure on energy on the supply side. The benefits from buildings efficiency are enormous. And a snapshot of the current BEA partner jurisdictions. So we have about 46 subnational jurisdictions which are a part of the accelerator. And on the right, you can see some of the newest cities which have been added to the accelerator in Latin America and in South Africa. 5 of these cities in the current BEA network are what is called the deep dive cities, where we have dedicated technical support to help handhold the city or the state to implement BEA activities. We also have about close to 50 plus organizations, which comprises NGOs, associations, service providers, and private companies. These are available to provide the necessary tools and expertise, as well as financial assistance to subnational governments. And what is the BEA providing as a network? The BEA's process of engagement in a city includes support for assessing and prioritizing locally appropriate policies and actions through a collaborative multi-stakeholder process. The second kind of assistance that BEA provides is in implementing these actions by matching the needs of the cities with expertise and resources and tools available within the BEA network. And third, tracking action and documenting progress, as well as sharing lessons learned to enable some sort of a peer learning amongst the different cities. The BEA engages with these cities through a menu of policy options and key actions based on the needs of the cities and the activities that the partnership can provide in each location. Cities will prioritize policies and activities, and the partnership will connect them to resources and engagement around those priorities. One of the major benefits that we have seen cities report as being a part of the BEA is the kind of international recognition that comes with being a part of the accelerator and the knowledge sharing that happens between cities from different parts of the world. That appears to be one of the good impacts of the BEA overall at the global level. And what are cities signing up to do? The cities are signing up to 3 actions: implementing a building efficiency policy, implementing a pilot program or project, and tracking and reporting progress. These are the foundations towards achieving the BEA global vision of all new buildings being highly efficient and zero carbon by 2030, and all buildings being zero carbon by 2050. And what is the kind of technical assistance on offer to cities? And we'll go a little bit into detail on this. On the right, you can see the key topics of BEA assistance and the different, and on the left, you can see the nestled technical assistance provided from deeper levels of support to the lighter levels of support. So while the BEA cities can select any type of policy and pilot projects on buildings efficiency, the BEA platform itself can best support actions in the 3 core offer topics: codes, renovations, and targets. And on the left, where you see there are the tools for providing the technical assistance. The first one, the playbooks, which are very recent development for us and something that has emerged from the needs expressed by the different cities, some sort of a step-by-step guide, a go-to guide, which cities can apply to their local circumstances. So the playbooks are designed to provide a self-guided pathway to action. And they also include illustrative case studies, suggested actions for each step, and links to available tools and resources appropriate for the different contexts of the city. The second one on peer learning, the peer learning assistance is provided through cohorts, and these are primarily cohorts of cities working on related projects and programs. Cities that are a part of the cohort will have access to regional workshops, peer learning opportunities, and webinars with other BEA cities with similar interests. So for example, we have a cohort on codes comprising of cities in Latin America led by the World Green Building Council. The third one on direct assistance is through two formats. There is a portion called leadership grants. Some of you may be familiar with this because we routinely call out for applications to call out cities to apply for these leadership grants. And the second bit is in partnership with the Clean Energy Solutions Center, through which we provide direct technical assistance to BEA jurisdictions on building policies and programs. This is a no-cost service which is available to most government representatives and BEA partners or technical institutes which are working with these cities on the BEA activities. And finally, we have the deep engagement activities available to deep dive cities in the BEA. I had mentioned there are 5 cities which are deep dive cities in the BEA right now. And the level of technical assistance is, as the name suggests, is deeper. So this assistance includes things like funded support on on-site staffing from a local BEA partner organization, which can be full-time or part-time and will be assigned to work with the jurisdiction for a period of 12 to 18 months. The idea being that the existing staff capacity in the jurisdiction is enhanced and there is a continuing focus on buildings efficiency. Given the fact that at the local level there are serious capacity issues, this kind of an assistance provided through a person sitting in the jurisdiction's implementing partner office makes a lot of difference. The assistance can also be provided in implementing and identifying policy and program priorities, including in leveraging the combined expertise and tools available within the network. And finally, assistance in developing strategies and funding for sustainability and institutionalization of building efficiency plans. So this in a nutshell is the kind of technical assistance which is currently available to partner cities. And if you have more questions on the different types and how they can be accessed, please feel free to reach out to us. I'll also talk very quickly on the BEA city action process. I won't go into the details of this because Rebecca would be covering this in her next presentation. So this is the kind of framework we use to prioritize actions as well as track their progress through the implementation of the BEA activities. I'll give you an example of the city of Nagpur, which is also a BEA deep dive city, and has recently identified its policy and project priorities. So a very extensive rounds of stakeholder consultations were held in Nagpur in partnership with the Nagpur Smart City SPV, which is the local implementing partner for the Nagpur City Deep Dive, and ICLEI is the implementing partner there. We understood that there is a need for the city to address affordable housing, given the push from the national government and the state government to construct more and more new affordable housing. So the policy document, the policy commitment that Nagpur has committed to is a tender policy which describes conditions required for energy efficient construction of affordable housing projects. And the project commitments are also adding up to this policy goals. So the first one being on reviewing the designs and plans for 2 new affordable housing buildings, which will in turn inform this particular tender policy document. There is also an existing effort under the project piece on benchmarking energy performance. This was also a need expressed at the stakeholder consultations workshop, where experts highlighted the fact that they don't know what the current energy performance of the buildings is. So through this BEA project, we are trying to identify a methodology for benchmarking energy performance in existing public and commercial buildings, and the results of this exercise can help with identifying candidates for energy audit exercises for doing investment grade retrofit projects for the city. So this is the example of the city of Nagpur's BEA policy and program engagement. And I would like to end my presentation by talking about some of BEA's accomplishments in the first phase, which ran from 2015 to 2017. 253 cities were reached out to with the BEA resources. We received commitments from from 25 cities on 47 commitments, and we have been tracking the impact on a carbon emissions mitigation level as well. So you can see this here. So this is all about the Building Efficiency Accelerator, and happy to answer questions at the end of this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Sumedha. We're now going to pass presentation to Rebecca Cameron.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Sumedha, for that introduction to the Building Efficiency Accelerator. My name is Rebecca Cameron. I'm a professional officer for climate change, energy, and resilience at ICLEI Africa. ICLEI is a global organization, and I work at the Africa Secretariat. We are a membership-based organization for local governments internationally and have over 1,500 members. And we represent these members' voices on the kind of global climate stage, but also work intensively with our members through programs such as the BEA. I'm going to speak about the stakeholder engagement and action selection process more generally, but specifically also reflect on the work that we've been doing through the deep dive in the city of Tshwane in South Africa, which is one of the capitals of South Africa. And yes, so get started, as Sumedha already mentioned, there is a process outlined through the BEA work, and it really begins with a commitment. And that commitment starts with a sign-up, filling in a partnership agreement between the city and the BEA kind of secretariat at WRI. And that commitment is really to say, we are interested in starting this process and we want to join this global community. What's possible there is that the director of the city manager of the city in question, or the department in that city, is able to sign up. But really it's about the city making that kind of initial commitment and showing interest. That's really important. And also to identify the preliminary interest areas. What we have done also in Africa is we've also engaged specifically with cities who have interest in this, and also with cities who are neighboring or in the same region as existing Building Efficiency Accelerator cities. So I'd encourage cities who are interested in signing up to also connect with the cities in their region, and you're welcome to contact WRI or ICLEI to find out which of those cities, or go to the BEA website to find which of the other sister cities you can connect with and learn from, even in your region, as a start. And I'm just going to go back, and then as you move through the process, it's presented as a linear process, but very often these happen iteratively and happen sometimes at the same time and concurrently. So then moving through assessment, understanding what are the necessary actions, and Sumedha provided a good example of that earlier. Then working to development and trying to understand how, using the different forms of support that BEA provides towards achieving your actions, how can you actually take the next step on your policy and program. And then implementation, also looking at implementing the BEA identified policy and project, and how you're actually going to resource that. Is it in partnership with another organization? Is it within the city structures itself? And there are a range of different kind of arrangements that have taken place across the world for implementation of the BEA policy and program. And then, of course, Sorry, I'm just going to move that away. I realized that was in the way. Apologies. And then improvement. And I think this is a really exciting thing. We're in the second phase actually of the BEA. And so we've already had 2 to 3 years of work in the initial 50 cities that signed up. And these cities are always looking to say, okay, what have we done? What has worked? How can we build on for the next phase of BEA? And we're always looking to see how we can actually take that next step and even raise the targets. So moving from energy efficiency to saying some cities are now even starting to commit to net zero, as in line with the Sustainable Energy for All goals. So Sumedha's already gone through this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but really just to say, I'm going to show you now some examples of stakeholder management or engagement rather, and activities and actions that were selected in each of these priority areas for BEA, both policy and then pilot program. Key here into understanding policy, it's also about, it could be an enabling framework, it could be an enabling strategy. It's important to understand what works for your city context, and is there a key policy that you can already link to but requires an implementation plan or an action plan that could also fit there. And then the pilot program is actually going about now implementing something and making kind of physical actual change that can be scaled up, and really as an opportunity to demonstrate to the city, the citizens, the private sector, and other departments within the city about the important role of building efficiency. So I'm not going to go through this again, but you can see we then move from commitment to assessment, and that's where that important idea of how do you actually start to set up, how do you set up the policy and program, and how do you unpack what is important for your city based on all the different views. So as we mentioned, the BEA is a public-private collaboration, and really it's important for BEA cities to define their own actions. And the few considerations here that we would really encourage cities to take into account are to ensure that BEA activities are aligned to city development goals. So all cities have an overarching strategy, and also linking that potentially even broader to potential national development goals. This is a very important linkage then further down the line as we move towards implementation and looking for financing and resources. Actions that are aligned with city strategy and even kind of provincial or regional strategies and national strategies are more likely to be resourced and taken on board and institutionalized than that which is just sitting within one person's mind in the department. So we would really encourage you to kind of draw on the city development strategy and goals as a first step. And BEA partners know how the city's priorities match with their expertise. So many, the BEA partners are both within the region, but also internationally. And BEA tries to connect these private sector partners, but also non-governmental organizations with the cities to understand how support can be provided. And then looking at facilitating the development of these activities that are tangible and targeted and meets an immediate need. BEA is really about especially taking action now, not only just sitting in that planning phase, but really concurrently taking action and making that tangible change. And that's linked then, of course, to the last point, which is around enabling quick wins that provide a foundation for additional action. So many of the pilot programs that you'll hear about and see today are really kind of initial almost sparks to light a kind of a bigger movement in the city. So they're very strategic actions. So a policy, what does it mean? Well, this goes into a bit more detail, and all these slides are available in the handouts in this webinar and will be available on the BEA website. And really, cities commit to adopt and implement a building efficiency policy. This is often most likely related to energy efficiency, but it can also relate to more broadly resource efficiency. And really, this can be a mandatory or voluntary policy, which is where it comes into, it can be kind of looking at bylaws, or it can be looking at a guiding strategy. It can range from incentives to regulations, so that carrot or stick, the carrot or stick analogy comes in here. And it's really about how are you going to take the next step? So are you requiring it? Are you mandating it? Are you encouraging it? Are you incentivizing stakeholders to make choices for building efficiency? Again, looking at your quick wins, things that can be easy, that you can have success within a shorter period of time. And then how do you actually institutionalize that within the city's building efficiency effort? So here are some examples of them, and the links are provided here, so please go take a look at these. I'm going to speak specifically about the city of Tshwane's examples. And here are some further more general examples, and this again can be, more information can be found at the link provided at this, on this slide. So a pilot program, what does a pilot program look like? Well, these are programs that should demonstrate the potential of building efficiency programs. So as Sumedha mentioned, they're looking at reviewing those two designs in order to eventually have an impact on 4,000 units. And to test an idea in a controlled number of buildings that can then be scaled up. And are you thinking about how it's going to be scaled up? And then it should also be the first step towards a broader portfolio of action, and should be designed with scalability, as we've already kind of really emphasized here. And it can be, but it's not necessarily has to be related to policy. So if you've already got a policy in place and you actually want to work on another policy action through BEA, but you want to now start implementing that initial policy that you already have, that existing policy you have, then you can also, the program that you identify doesn't have to be directly linked to the policy that you also identify. But it's really great when there is that interplay too. These are some great examples from Mexico and from the United States on the types of programs that have been undertaken. And you can find more information on these slides at the links, and I would really encourage you to do so. We can also, the great advantage of the BEA is also about it's not just us saying that these examples exist, but we can actually also connect you with the people who've been working on these examples if you're interested in learning more. And what have we done in the city of Tshwane? So in the city of Tshwane, they have already committed to and are part of the C40 buildings program, and which is based in Africa. There are 4 cities that are part of it. The city of Tshwane is one of them. And that program specifically looks at the new building code. So when the city of Tshwane, who was actually part of phase 1 of BEA also, they've been working on identifying priorities, and coming out of the stakeholder engagement process, which I'll describe in a bit, they were able to identify that actually, because C40 program is working on new buildings, there's a current gap in building efficiency policy and programs in the city, which is what to do with the existing building stock. And that's both the existing municipal building stock and also the wider kind of the privately owned building stock. And that really led to this policy. So we decided to focus on through the kind of discussing with the city, and a new unit that was set up in the city called Group Property, which is in charge of facilities management for all existing buildings within the portfolio, and really to look at procurement guidelines for building efficiency retrofits to guide how the city goes about appointing contractors and providing goods and services towards the retrofitting of their existing buildings. The program we're linking to this policy, and that is starting with almost embedding building efficiency in the terms of reference for one of the priority buildings for a deep retrofit within, or almost a refurbishment within the city. But we needed to do, so then you see we've identified various activities. And this was all done with the partners that you can see on the right, the city of Tshwane, ICLEI, and then the Green Building Council is also an implementing partner here. So we need to start with, actually concurrently, we started with stakeholder engagement, both internal and external groups. And this is very important for us as a stakeholder engagement tool. We have an internal interdepartmental group that meets, and this is called the Green Building Hub. It brings together the range of departments which building efficiency all impact on, or all have a mandate to engage in building efficiency, whether it's the municipal owned buildings or it's the buildings that the municipality constructs through the National Housing Program. And also building control, so review of the private sector. Then that Green Building Hub is actually the same stakeholder group that the C40 New Buildings Program uses. So we really wanted to ensure the long-term sustainability of the stakeholder engagement by closely aligning it with other programs to ensure that there isn't actually stakeholder fatigue. And that was a very important point from the start for us. Then the second stakeholder engagement that we have is the external groups. And this is where we invite the internal Green Building Hub to engage with private sector stakeholders and consultants in the city of Tshwane and the broader Gauteng region, which is the provincial area where the city of Tshwane is located. This allows for interaction and refining of ideas and co-development of strategies between the public and private sector, which is the kind of key focus area for Building Efficiency Accelerator. So we did, and through that, we also do capacity building and training of both the public sector officials and the private sector. So stakeholder engagement really is key to this whole achievement of the policy and program. Then we also provide kind of technical assistance and awareness raising. There's also a communications campaign to engage stakeholders even outside actually the current stakeholder engagement process of both internal and external, because City of Tshwane has a new green building that they operate from, and how are we communicating the benefits and the way in which to operate that building to the officials that use that building daily. So that's very important. Also as part of the stakeholder engagement. So not only through formal meetings and workshops, but also through kind of daily engagement through communications campaign. A second form of engagement that we run through the BEA program in Africa is the Africa Regional Network. Here you can see the organizations which are part of this group. And just to go back, just to understand, on the stakeholder engagement at the City of Tshwane, the internal groups meet every 2 months and the external groups meet every about 3 months. So that's the kind of regularity that we're working with. The internal group is new, but the external group actually existed prior to the current phase of BEA. It was set up in BEA phase 1. So that's a really great legacy. And you can see how the city has really taken leadership and driven these stakeholder engagement processes to make sure that there's a platform for engagement and conversation on building efficiency. So these are the organizations that are then involved in the Africa Regional Network. We have webinars and engagements online every 2 months, and I would encourage, if anybody else is active here in the Africa region, please reach out to me. I'd love for you to join. This is an open group where organizations that are working to support local governments or other kind of organs of state on building efficiency across Africa come together as to learn from one another, to share opportunities for further collaboration, and to share technical expertise and experience. There's some exciting examples, of work being undertaken in Rwanda, Kenya, Ghana, and in South Africa, and also and Botswana, of course, as well as some other countries. So then that's all for me on stakeholder engagement, and I look forward to hearing the questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. And now we will move to Debbie Weyl from WRI, who will present some of our BEA tools for getting started.
Great, thank you very much, Shannon, and thanks to Sumedha and Rebecca for those excellent presentations. You've heard now a bit from both Sumedha and Rebecca about how to get started by selecting policies and projects, engaging stakeholders, etc. And what I want to talk about is some of the tools and resources that we have through the BEA that helps you do just that. We'll walk pretty quickly through the 4 early steps that we recommend BEA cities take, and this will align with what you've already heard from some of the examples, for instance, in India and South Africa. But these 4 steps on working with stakeholders, evaluating policy and project options, having a public commitment to action, and creating a work plan. So to start with, the first step, and Rebecca was just speaking about this in Chwane, the first step really is to map stakeholders. What we've seen in the BEA is that it's really critical to engage across, as in the example of Chwane, to engage across both internal stakeholders within the public sector as well as external stakeholders more broadly in the community. And there are a number of reasons for this. Diverse stakeholder perspectives really lead to innovative cross-sector solutions. As we'll talk about in some of the tools that we have, what you'll see is different groups of stakeholders actually have different perspectives about what the status is of various policies and programs already in the city and how difficult it would be to implement new ones. And getting those kinds of perspectives shared and in one place can be an excellent learning process and can lead to really different solutions than might come about otherwise. Diverse stakeholder perspectives are also critical to establish a shared vision for the future of buildings in the city. These shared commitments to pursue that vision lead to longer term engagements, they lead to more collaboration, and this really helps to innovate those solutions that you've come up with in the first place. And finally, the incorporation of all of these perspectives creates a more comprehensive understanding of what are the barriers and risks before you get started, as well as what are those opportunities that the city may not already be taking advantage of for various proposed work plans. So going into the work planning process with a real understanding of what the different barriers are that you're trying to overcome and what those long-term goals are that are most critical to the city. Within the building and construction sector, there are a really broad set of stakeholders that we recommend involving. As Sumedha and Rebecca have touched upon, the actions that are required or the actions that one can take in order to improve buildings really cuts across a broad swath of the public and private sector. So we have here a set of what all the stakeholders are that we recommend involving. There's government and civil society, and this is both local governments as well as provincial and national governments, along with civil society. In addition, on the private sector side, we've broken this down into 2 main groups. One is the owners, managers, and occupants. So these are the folks who are owning and using the buildings, as well as the service providers. So that includes the developers, builders, and design and construction professionals who are designing the buildings, as well as the suppliers and manufacturers who are providing all of the technology that will go into the buildings, and the investors who are financing the buildings. Each of these has a really critical role to play in incentivizing or providing a critical piece of the building. And then utilities, of course, energy and water utilities provide service to the building, provide energy service to the building, and the policies that they have can really shape what's possible in terms of improving the building stock of the city as well. So we recommend beginning by creating a really comprehensive list of all of these different stakeholder types. And we actually have a template available online that you can use as a starting point to build this list. And it breaks out all of these different stakeholder types so that you can start thinking through, in your own local context, who are the critical individuals, first, what are the critical organizations that fall into these different stakeholder types? And then second, who are the actual individuals within those organizations that you would want to reach out to and incorporate into the kinds of working groups that you were hearing about in Chwane and in Nagpur? Once you have mapped those stakeholders, the next step is to bring them together to evaluate what the different policy and program options are that you might take in your city. We have available for this step as well a tool that is a template for selecting your policy and project. And it's really helpful to consider a number of things as you select which actions to move forward. One question is, which barrier will these actions help overcome? Depending on what your starting point is in the city, you may be really keenly aware that there are institutional barriers or financial barriers or barriers of awareness around improving buildings. So understanding what barrier you're trying to overcome will then help you to define which actions you want to take to overcome it. Similarly, it's important to keep in mind what the most important outcomes are that the city is trying to achieve. So if the economic benefits are really top of mind, then what are the different actions that will help lead to those economic benefits? And same with the environmental and social benefits that buildings can provide. And Sumedha talked a bit about what some of all of those benefits are, but we can certainly help think through within the BEA network what some of those benefits are and how they apply directly to your local context. The next two kind of come together in terms of how important and how difficult are the different actions, and we'll talk about a tool we have specifically to think about this, but thinking about these two in combination and trying to find those actions that will have a significant impact, but that also can be implemented more easily perhaps than some others, can be a really interesting way to prioritize among a broad set of interventions. And then finally, thinking about what the current status of a policy is compared to the desired future status, so that you understand what the space is between where you are and where you want to be, and have really clear goals to get there. For pilot programs, it's also helpful to think about what idea a pilot program is trying to test and whether it can be scaled up. While doing a demonstration project for retrofitting, one building or two buildings is a really, really excellent starting point. It's critical to think about, is this trying to show how to implement to a new building code, perhaps, that stakeholders are nervous about whether it's implementable, or what is the pilot program trying to show, trying to test, and then how do you scale that up from one or two buildings to 30% of the buildings in the public sector or something like that? What are the challenges that you need to think about in terms of financing, in terms of technology, etc.? So in terms of the importance and difficulty, one of the tools that we have available is, and this actually incorporates those stakeholders that we mapped in the first step, is this assessment tool for building efficiency policies. And we actually have an Excel file that you can download that helps to create all of these charts and then to process the data. And it's difficult to see, but on the side here you have the difficulty spectrum. So down here are actions that are not at all difficult, and up here are actions that are extremely difficult. Over here you have an assessment that this action is not at all important, and here that it is extremely important. So this sheet shows, for example, for building energy codes, you can see the red dots are the private sector, blue is public sector, and green is non-governmental organizations. And for building energy codes, each of the participants placed a dot at how important and how difficult they thought a building energy code would be to implement. You get a lot of information from this straightforward exercise. For instance, you can see that on the spectrum of importance, there's a cluster that the private sector thinks that building codes are really, really important, right? And the NGOs maybe think it's slightly less important. Similarly, the private sector tends to think that it's more difficult than the public sector, which is down here with the blue dots. So it shows really interesting information, and you can compare, of course, across policies to see which are the ones that come out as more important and perhaps less difficult. And what are some of these discrepancies among stakeholder groups that should lead to very fruitful discussion as you try to bring those perspectives a bit closer together and understand where the differences come from. This we generally use in person as a stakeholder workshop exercise. You actually have people physically go around the room and put sticky dots on a piece of paper, and it gets very good conversation started for a workshop. We also have an online version of this tool where you can send an email to stakeholders and have them provide the same information. We have an example timeline here for the survey where we suggest about 3 weeks to receive responses. It takes a little bit of time, even though it's a short survey, to get folks engaged. And we find this to be a really excellent way if you don't have the ability to have an in-person workshop at the moment. And then through an online tool on the Building Efficiency Accelerator website, we can map the results. So this is an example from Bogota, Colombia, where you can see there were 35 people that responded to this survey. And in this wheel, you see the breakdown of all of the different sectors where these stakeholders are from. There are two things. On the summary tab, you see a combined sort of ranking list based on the perceived importance and difficulty. That number one for the stakeholders in Bogota was working with utilities, followed by efficiency improvement targets, etc. And you can see a map here. And if you scroll over these on the website, it tells you what each of the dots stands for. And then on this status bar, you can actually see this question of where are we now, which is the blue dot, and where do we want to be? So for working with utilities, which came up as the number one priority, we're in Bogota, stakeholders think that we're somewhere between planning to implement and piloting, but actually they want to see national implementation to the extent that that's possible. So there's a large gap between the current status and the desired status. This online tool is something that we can provide to any of the BEA cities, so please reach out if this is of interest, and is a really great way to follow up on the stakeholder mapping exercise by getting initial input then from those stakeholders if you can't do it in person. Once you have prioritized, you've mapped your stakeholders, you've thought about what the different options are, you've maybe done these stakeholder exercises to help prioritize what actions you want to take. The next step that we suggest is the public commitment. And we see in the Building Efficiency Accelerator that public commitments are really critical for a number of reasons. Number one, they create accountability. If you're making this public statement, you're bringing in the broader community and creating some accountability to live up to this commitment that you've made. This also helps to institutionalize goals, especially if you're making public a quantitative target, because it's something, again, that with accountability, it can be more sort of baked into the institutions that are responsible. This also supports the adoption and implementation of new policies and priorities, which can then generate new ideas to follow on. And so this is a really critical first step in increasing ambition over time for reducing energy consumption. As Rebecca was saying, there are a number of cities that started by saying we want to take initial steps to improve the energy efficiency of our buildings. And as they've seen the benefits and really engaged with stakeholders across the community, they're now actually taking further steps to go towards net zero carbon buildings. Which is an excellent sort of path to get started on. That once you see the successes and the possibilities around efficiency, that the city and the stakeholder group wants to continue along that path of increasing ambition. One example here on how to make public commitments is through a kickoff workshop. The kickoff workshop provides a great opportunity for stakeholder engagement. You can do that in-person exercise with the sticky dots on mapping how important and difficult different policies are. And it also tends to result in partner commitments to support BEA work. It provides that opportunity to identify and weigh the pros and cons of different policy and program options. The city leadership the city can demonstrate their leadership on setting a vision for building efficiency, and it also provides a really concrete opportunity to identify next steps for goals and prioritizing actions. We have resources again available online for how to run a kickoff workshop, including draft agendas and reports from previous workshops like the one that you see here. And so this is a way to get started a bit more quickly, learning from what other cities have already done in the past. Finally, once you've prioritized your actions, having a work plan really helps you to stay on track. There are a few elements of successful work plans. We try to encourage cities to select goals that can be achieved in 2 to 3 years, and this is a pretty short time frame for city action. And the reason for this is to really demonstrate quickly the benefits and effectiveness of these energy efficiency policies. We don't say that every policy and every project can be completed in 2 to 3 years, but we try to start with ones that can be in order to build momentum towards the policies that may be a bit more difficult and take more time. As well as setting those goals for 2 to 3 years, we encourage cities to set intermediate milestones for what successful implementation looks like so that you can actually see success even sooner. And it's really critical to establish clear roles and responsibilities for specific actions. This enhances the accountability created through those public announcements and makes clear who to go to for questions about those different actions. There are examples, again, of past work plans available online on the Building Efficiency Accelerator Basecamp program site. If you don't have access to the Basecamp site, you can reach out to any one of us and we will be able to provide you with that or to send you the individual resources that you are looking for. So with that, I think I will wrap up the tools section and we can go into any Q&A. Shannon, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks, Debbie. Wonderful. For everyone on the line, please submit any questions that you have for our panelists through the questions pane that you'll see on the GoToWebinar node on your screen. I want to start with a question we received for Rebecca, which is we have an attendee who would like to know why there are not cities so far in the ICLEI Africa network from the East, West, and Central African regions, or if you could explain a little bit more about why the network looks the way it does and what you're hoping to do in the future.
Sure, great, very good question. So we have in the BEA, we have currently we now have 6 members, and we have 4 in South Africa. That's city of Umhlutuzi, who's the most recent one. Then we have Msunduzi, Kwadakuza, and city of Tshwane. Then we have 2 members, BEA city members in Kenya, which is Nairobi and Kisii County. And then we have Accra in Ghana. So we have some West African representation, some East African, but you're right, it is more strongly, there seem to be more members in South Africa. In the regional network group, we work with organizations who work in West Africa and specifically Ghana again, and then looking at Rwanda and Kenya, organizations that work in Uganda, Botswana, and then South Africa specifically. We are going to also be engaging now more with some organizations who are working in North Africa, so organizations based in Morocco, but also have a footprint across other countries in North Africa. And so we always welcome new participation. And if you also know of any organizations or cities that you believe would benefit, please also contact me or Shannon at WRI. I would love to have a further conversation with you. So really, this is just this is the initial group as it currently stands, and we really hope to expand it more broadly to make sure we, coordinating as organizations working on this, but also making sure that the cities are well supported to also learn from one another through this network. So it's not for any particular reason other than to say this is the group that has connected thus far, but always open to expanding further. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. We had a technical question, which is whether the webinar will be, whether we can share the recorded webinar, and absolutely, we've recorded the entire webinar, so that'll be available both on the BEA Basecamp as well as it'll be sent to all of the attendees, or you can always reach out to us to ask for a copy of it, as well as any other resources that we've mentioned here. I'm gonna ask just one more question. And again, if there are any outstanding questions, please submit them here or follow up with us via email. I want to direct this question to Sumedha, which is just, obviously in every region, the BEA's engagement is a little bit different. But from your perspective, I'm wondering if you can say something about how a city would know that they're a good fit for the BEA or that the BEA is right for them.
Sure. So as far as their fit with the BEA is concerned, especially in the Indian context, the kind of queries we have received and the kind of interest that we have seen has primarily come from the leadership itself, where they see that they do want to do something about the way buildings are coming up in their city. One of the things that they specifically are concerned about is the fast growth. So many cities in India are going through a process of growing very fast, and they are in the need of technical assistance, especially on the building side, because these are all new buildings being added to the building stock every year. So the right fit as far as being a BA candidate city, we've seen that fast growing cities, cities with already existing implementing partners of the BEA network. So as I had shown in my slide, there are about 50 plus organizations which are a part of the BEA network. So that's another kind of fit in terms of criteria for applying to be a part of the BEA network. And the third kind of criteria, if I may say, is just with respect to the capacity. So the ability to work with the capacity and the expertise provided from the BA would be the other thing that we have seen, at least in the Indian context, has motivated cities to apply for being considered to be a part of the BA network.
Thanks, Sumedha. That's great. All right. Well, seeing no more questions, I think that we're going to close the webinar right on the hour, but I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one more question that we're going to cover. The question is, how can external stakeholders support energy efficiency? Whoever asked this, if you'd like to expand on it at all, that would be great. I think, assuming that the question is about non-city stakeholders that might want to support energy efficiency action in cities. Debbie, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Thanks, Shannon. We have a really, this is a great question, and we are eager to connect with additional organizations that want to work on building efficiency through the Building Efficiency Accelerator. You can certainly reach out to one of us to connect. Just as Rebecca described the Africa Regional Network, we have similar coordination in most regions around the world, and we also have similar coordination through a global network. So we would be really excited to welcome additional organizations into those networks where you can share what you've done and what you've learned with the broader community, with a broad set of global cities, with specific cities and partners in specific regions, etc. Yeah, there's always more experience and more best practice to bring in. So please do reach out to us, and we'd be really keen to provide you with more information on how exactly to link into all those different networks.
Thanks, Debbie. Okay. Thanks all for joining us. Again, if you're interested in more information or have questions about how the Building Efficiency Accelerator can support your work, or you can get involved, please follow up with us. The information is on the screen, and we'll also be sending this presentation again to all attendees, and it will be available on the Building Efficiency Accelerator Basecamp, as well as a Building Efficiency Accelerator webinar site that we will share in follow-up. And again, thank you to our panelists. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.